Okay, guys, it's 3:07 p.m. on October 7th, 2017, and Chad Myers is fueling the flames. Let's hear what he has to say.
90-mile-per-hour storm forecast to be 105 at landfall. Big changes since we've been away here, so we need to pay attention. The water is still very warm. Hurricane Hunter finding a closing eye, which means the storm is intensifying. It is getting stronger. The storm surge will be 11 feet now with this storm as it makes its way onshore. There you go, 105 miles per hour, 7 o'clock tonight Central Time, very close to Pilot Town. That's the end of the Mississippi River. And then it's going to turn to the right a little bit and head right toward Biloxi. Biloxi, you could see wind gusts of 120 miles per hour. So all of a sudden, we've ramped up from a tropical storm to what will be a Category 2 at landfall. Hurricane warnings here in red. Hurricane watches even still around still, but really it's the tropical storm warnings that go from Montgomery all the way to Birmingham.
There we go. Okay, guys, this is going to be, I don't even know where to start on this one. Apparently, it's going to come ashore, and then it's going to go to Biloxi, and it's going to pick up 30-mile-an-hour winds. So this is going to be the first hurricane in the history of humanity where a storm hits land and gets stronger on land. Okay, let's just note that. But let's talk about this now. He just told us that this storm has now reached what?
90-mile-per-hour storm forecast to be 105 at landfall.
105 it's supposed to be. When it gets there, right now it's 90 miles an hour. Let's look at the actual little floaty things in the water that have wind speed indicators, because I will refresh this page just to show you what our National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's floaty things in the water are telling us. The Atlantic Hurricane Nate. Okay, we've got a refreshed page here. These are all the buoys in the path of Hurricane Nate. Now, in order to show you this, I have to show you what knot wind speeds are. In order for us to have a hurricane, we must have a minimum of 74-mile-an-hour winds, which is 64 knots. Let's go back to our NOAA buoys here, since all of these are in the path of this storm, as per the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's own directory. This is the directory that they give anybody who's willing to look at the truth. WSP is wind speed and KTS is in knots. Remember, you have to have 64 knots to be 74 miles an hour to register a hurricane. Let's take a peek and see what the wind speeds are. Here we go. Wind speeds: 15 knots, 15 knots, 27 knots, 26 knots, 31 knots, 28 knots, 29 knots, 42 knots, 38 knots, all the way down, 45 knots, 29 knots, 15 knots, 19 knots, 15 knots, 22, 27, 27, 41. But that's actually on a ship. That does not count as a buoy, but that doesn't matter. It's still nowhere close to 64. Not one of these is recording 64-mile-an-hour winds, 64-knot-an-hour winds, you guys. This matters. This matters because what they're telling us here is a complete fraud. Let's go to the radar and actually see what they've got cooking in this Gulf of Mexico. Hopefully we'll be able to see what they're doing here. This is ridiculous, you guys. This is criminal, what they're doing here. Refresh this page if it will let me. I'll put on the NASA images so you can see the tomfoolery. But definitely there's something in the shape. There's something taking the shape, and we can thank whatever was going on in Cuba earlier today. If I can find the images from Cuba, we'll take a look here. This is courtesy of Cuba. This was this morning at 9:40, 10 o'clock a.m. And you can see that they were cooking this up with our consent. This is totally something that they are consenting to. Let's see what's happening in our national radar. And we'll see if any of these, it's interesting how these patterns condense in the areas where this thing is supposed to flow. This is a completely contrived storm. This is something that we're making. We're making upon ourselves. But just to show you the truth is that the wind speeds, as they're reporting to us on the news, don't match. These wind speeds right here, knots per hour, they're not reflective whatsoever. Not one of them reflects hurricane strength, guys. So you got to wonder, why is Chad Myers such a devil? Why is he lying like this? Really, he ought to be disgusted
changes since
with
we've been
himself.
away here, so we need to pay attention. The water's
waters, and he talks about the hurricane hunter. Give me a break. What about NOAA's buoys? What about wind speed indicators? What about the radar that's actually there? It doesn't show a hurricane. What you have is a storm that they're obviously cooking. They're obviously cooking the storm right here. You can see it. You can see it here, and you can see what they were doing in Cuba earlier today. So this is a nightmare, you guys. This is our own government. Our own government. The mainstream media has been co-opted as an agent of propaganda. And this is what they're doing. Time to wake up, folks.